All right, hello and welcome to First Bank's Center for Family-Owned Businesses webinar series. I'm Mike Vanderveld and I'll be your facilitator. Today's topic is managing conflict in a family-owned business. Before we get started, allow me to cover just a few logistics. The lines are muted, but at any time, please send us your questions through the webinar tool. We'll have about 25 minutes of content before opening it up for those questions. Keep your mouse handy. We will have a polling question along the way. All right, let me jump over to slide 2 and let's meet our presenters. Starting off today, we'll hear from First Bank Corporation Chairman Michael Dierberg, and then our special guest, Kaitlyn Erb, a consultant from CMA, will take the stage. Their complete bios can be found in the attachments section of the webinar tool. With that said, we're ready to dive in. I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Dierberg.
Well, great. Well, thank you and welcome. So if you know a little bit about First Bank, you know we are a family-owned business, fourth generation. I'm part of that fourth generation. And you also hopefully know that we are not only a family-owned business, but we focus on family-owned businesses. And one of the things that from our own experience, my own experience, and also our experience dealing with other family-owned businesses, what I can say is that there are a whole lot of joys that come from being associated with, being a part of a family-owned business. There's a lot of good things and a lot of advantages we have as family-owned businesses relative to our bigger peers and the publicly traded companies. But there can be one significant downside to a family-owned business, and that is conflict, and that's our topic for today. So if you can manage conflict in the best way possible, that will go a long way towards allowing you the time to focus on the things that are most fun, growing the business, supporting employees, your family members, and the community around you. So let's kick it off by talking about the first topic, which is sources of conflict. So if you're familiar, you've seen some presentations on family-owned businesses before, you're aware of this idea that there are multiple hats that we can wear as family members in a family business. You can wear all three hats at one time. You could wear one hat depending on the person. So first hat would be the family hat. You're a brother, a sister, a parent, etc. And some of the issues that you may face may come as part of just as a family member. And then there's the shareholder hat you wear. You may be a shareholder in the company, depending on how it's been passed in the company or in through the family. And issues that may arise there may include things like dividends, distributions, those sorts of things. And then there's the employee hat that we wear. And the employee hat is something that you as a manager in the business or just an employee in the business, that's a hat you wear. You may interact with each other, with other family members, with other people in the company, just as an employee. So not only do you have these three hats that you wear, but each of these hats can also be its own source of conflict. And it's important in managing conflict to recognize when the conflicts are flowing from one into the other. So just an example would be a conflict or a disagreement that maybe starts with a family issue, and then it bleeds into a business issue. Maybe something where there's just a conflict between, let's say, siblings or a parent and a child. It's a personal issue, but then it becomes a business issue because someone brings it into that business discussion. And then in addition, it could be a business issue. It might be just a disagreement about how the business is being run, but that may bleed into a family issue or a personal relationship. And the goal is to keep these issues as much as possible, any conflicts, separate and contained. So just to go back to these examples, let's say the family to the business, if there's a family issue that you have, the more you can keep that contained within the family and to the dynamics within that family, the better, and not have that become a business issue where it starts to impact business decision making. Same way from the business to the family. If you have a business issue or decision that's being made and maybe the family disagrees about it, if that carries over into the family relationships, it's not certainly a good thing for the family relationships. And actually, it can be a bad thing for the business as well because it impacts your ability to function if you're not having a good personal relationship. So let's go to the next slide. Another source of potential conflict is self-deception and collusion. And the underlying ideas here come from the Arbinger Institute. They've written a variety of books on this topic, one of which is leadership and self-deception. And the first concept is self-deception. And the idea here is that someone mentally starts with a desired self-interested outcome and then chooses facts and distorts reality to justify that desired outcome. And as you can see, it's sort of the reverse of the way it should work. It should work that you start with the facts and then work towards the outcome based on those facts. But in this way of thinking, you flip those. And what can happen along the way is that as part of this reality distortion, you often get into blaming others. And we're all guilty of this at one time or another. Another element to this can be collusion. So collusion is the idea. It can happen in a variety of different ways, but one of the ideas is that in this reality distortion field that we create around ourselves, we may be looking for affirmation from others, and often we are looking for affirmation from others. So we present the facts as we are describing them to people we know, and then we're looking for affirmation back from them that we're right and somebody else is wrong. So these problems of self-deception and collusion can occur outside of a family business, and often they do. And actually, the book Leadership and Self-Deception is not limited to family businesses, but they can be really significant in this context for a couple of reasons. So one of them is that there are certain family relationships that will be naturally inclined towards providing affirmation. So, for example, one would be a spouse. So there might be somewhat of an expectation among spouses that when you tell your spouse something, you're seeking affirmation. They're not. You're giving them a limited amount of facts, and you kind of expect affirmation from that. And it may be the same way from a child to a parent, looking for affirmation from the parent. And then the other part of this that can be particularly negative in a family business is that it could lead to tribal perspectives, depending on the alignment of the family. So the closer the alignment, the more you may get into an issue where you're expected to provide affirmation, or you're looking for affirmation from those close to you, and it creates this tribal atmosphere. Let's go to the next slide. So it's really important to strike an appropriate balance between the extremes of, on the one hand, totally avoiding conflict, and other continual, perpetual, and destructive conflict, especially when it becomes personal. And generally speaking, you can't avoid most business disagreements. You want the business to thrive. In the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, this is described, this fear of conflict is described as one of the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and hopefully your family sees yourself as a team, and this is one of the biggest problems a team can have towards success. And I think those of you, I think probably all of the listeners are in the business world, that a team cannot function well if you're avoiding conflict. Now, there may be instances where there's a particularly deep-seated family issue that you are unlikely to solve. And an example of this may be perhaps there's a family issue, some conflict, maybe it goes back a long period of time, maybe even back when you're kids, and perhaps there's a business decision to be made, a disagreement, and everyone around you might think that how could this get to be such a big deal as a business decision, but in reality, it stems from something deeper. The question is, do you deal with the surface issue, the business issue, or perhaps what's really making it a bigger issue than it is, which is some family conflict? Well, that's really up to the family member to decide whether the benefits of addressing an issue outweigh the cost and given the likelihood of resolving it. But as a general matter, being a good steward will often require difficult decisions and difficult conversations. Next slide. So to minimize the impact of conflict, there are a lot of things that families can do to minimize the impact of conflict depending on the subject. And just as an example, when it comes to employment of family members, you can minimize the impact by, for example, setting out ground rules in advance and using outside help to evaluate the performance of family members. So a lot of the ways of minimizing the impact of conflict will depend on the subject. And in future webinars, we'll get into some of those topics and some of those ways of minimizing the conflict. So next, I'd like to introduce Kaitlyn Erb. So Kaitlyn Erb is eminently qualified to speak to this topic. Kaitlyn is both a family member of 4th generation business, a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology, and a consultant and expert who advises other families on dealing with these sorts of issues, whether it's conflict or a host of issues that family businesses face. So Kaitlyn, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here today. Quite the intro, but let me set the stage, folks. I am not going to resolve all of your toughest family business conflicts today, not even close. But I do hope to leave you with two things. One being the recognition that if you and your family are going through some tough conflict spots right now, you are not alone. And the other being a tool that you can use to get started in this pursuit. So as Mike mentioned, one of the first and best ways that you can manage conflict is through prevention. Recognizing patterns in how you attempt to handle conflict and how others around you attempt to handle it. So noticing my typical approach to conflict, noticing it in your parents, your siblings, recognizing the ways that you usually react can give you useful data to decide how you want to address it in the future. So I'll ask you all in the next 15 minutes to do your best to get out of autopilot and sit with me here in an honest spot. Think about what you actually do most often, because recognizing those patterns when your best behavior hat is off is going to be helpful to you. If we can do the next slide. In case anybody needs a reminder of things that might cause our best behavior hats to come off, you don't have to look much further than your current stressful context. Might I remind you that you're all navigating a pandemic, economic uncertainty, politics, power dynamics, lifestyle changes, parenting stress, oh yeah, all while trying to navigate the usual dynamics of running that thing we call a family-owned business, right? It's not easy. I'm asking you to do a hard thing here, to learn a tough skill, but learning to navigate conflict during stress will require some intentionality. So let's dive in together, recognize some patterns, and give both ourselves and our family members some grace. On this slide here, I'm going to borrow a tool from a book called No Fault Negotiating by Len Laritz. You can see my copy here. It is not a new book. In fact, it's, I think, copyright 1987. So this isn't a new tool either. But the good news is conflict is not a new problem. Many topics in psychology, especially in my coaching practice at CMA, are about helping people close what we call the knowing-doing gap. Said differently, and actually I'm going to steal a quote from a family business owner that I heard recently, there's a difference in knowing the path and walking the path. And that's true for conflict more than almost anything else. We know what we maybe should do or how we want to handle it, but it doesn't mean that we do. We're human, we're messy, our emotions get in the way of our good intentions and our rational thinking. So I'm going to talk you through some things that might happen when you lose that rational thinking, when your emotions take over. On the next slide is an intro to these levels. I'm going to give you kind of a paradigm, these 5 levels of thinking and relating. It's a framework, a way to think about how people function in their relationships and in the way that they think. So in this model, there are 5 levels. And it's obvious to all of us that we differ in how we think and relate, right? You're thinking, duh, Kaitlyn, I don't need a degree in psychology to tell you that. But once we start to negotiate or discuss a conflict, we often lose that ability to recognize that differences are natural. We might think that the other person is wrong or stupid or stubborn, things that aren't always true. Each level, though, is present in all adults. So as I walk through these 5 levels, challenge yourself not just to do what's easy and identify the behaviors in others, maybe especially in our family members, but also think about how you recognize them within yourself. We all do them, it just depends on when and where. So on the next slide is our first intro to the levels. You can see starting at the bottom is what we learn first as a way to control what's happening around us, this enforcing mindset. If anybody out there is familiar with Erikson's stages of development, the development tasks when you're around 2 to 5 years old are focused on autonomy and initiative or purpose. We're learning how to do things on our own. So we're exercising power, we're trying to control things by doing that, by exerting power over others. Looks like if I want a toy, I'm going to take it, and that's the level of conflict there. Scorekeeping is what it sounds like. It's turf wars. It's dividing a cookie between two kids on the playground, and you better believe that they're making sure that one doesn't get a bigger half than the other. Peacemaking is sweeping it under the rug, making sure we're not rocking the boat. And producing is kind of being that rebel that goes out on their own, that says, you know what, forget about all of the rest of you, I'm going to do my own thing. Each of those four operates from a model of scarcity and has its downsides. Our goal, and where we all like to think we operate, is partnering, recognizing that we're all connected and that we can find mutually beneficial decisions. So I want to get some gut reactions here. Before we dive in deeper, we're going to launch a poll to give me your first impression on where you see yourself.
All right. Yeah, very good. Grab your mouse, and I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll now. You're going to see that pop up on your screen, and go ahead and take just a few moments to click through. Again, this is anonymous, so your honest feedback is appreciated here. And go ahead and click your answers. All righty. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down, and let's take a look here. And so it looks like 39% are in that level 5, 20% are in that level 4, 33% are in level 3 peacemaking. We got a couple of votes for scorekeeping and a couple for enforcing. So does that surprise you, Kaitlyn? What are your thoughts there?
Hey, I'm glad people are being honest and recognizing some of these patterns in themselves, even if it's not the most desirable pattern. So thank you, folks, for taking my plea for honesty seriously. I'm going to talk through each of these in more detail and highlight some ways to deal with each one. So my challenge for you is to keep thinking, pay attention, and see if your gut reaction stays the same or changes as we talk through them. So when you're in an enforcing mindset, your thought in the back of your mind, your need is survival. And folks believe that they must use force to get what they need, right? This is that idea of if I want a toy, I'm going to take it. If you can't force someone to do things your way, you might run away, and it might look like fear, threats, demands, intimidation. It's a kind of self-centered way of thinking. It shows limited insight into others. Remember, we first learned this on the playground. And so one way that we commonly hear this talked about is that it's either my way or the highway. I don't know about your family, but I can say for certain this is one we've had in our family tree before and have joked about plenty. But it can, at its worst, it can be that kind of all or nothing approach that might makes right. It's, like I said, characteristic of young kids and adults when we feel very threatened or when we feel inadequate. So if you're dealing with this with a family member, focus on getting their attention, making it safe to re-engage with them. Don't let yourself be bullied. This is a good place to call a timeout and reset. The next level is scorekeeping. We learned this one around elementary school age. At that age, we're focusing on comparisons. A lot of those comparisons. Back to that cookie. You know, if I'm getting some, you better make sure my sister gets exactly the same. Another, quote that we always talk about in family business is, what's fair isn't always what's equal. That is not the mindset of the scorekeeper. They tend to believe that others may not trust them, that there's not enough to go around. So I might need to be a little bit deceitful to make sure that we're all getting an equal share. It kind of looks like planning, strategizing, keeping score to make sure that I'm not cheated. And if that doesn't work, I'll resort to bargaining or kind of a 50-50 compromise. I have a prompt here if you're falling out of your self-focus. A common way you might get sucked into the scorekeeping mindset is keeping a list of all the household chores you've done and those that your spouse hasn't done, especially if you're one that likes to avoid the dishwasher. Watch out here for always or never language, right? Grandma always favored Joey, so I deserve this to make things equal. I'm just evening things out. So this is also a common one that we see in family businesses. If you're dealing with it, focus on processes, criteria, if you've set those up beforehand. Keep the focus on the real issue and don't let folks get stuck in the past, right? Scorekeeping often deals with pulling back into childhood and bringing up past issues. Next up is peacemaking. This one speaks to the need to belong, believing that in order to get what we want, we have to please others, we can't make waves, we have to be nice. A common example here is the spouse who's not involved in the day-to-day of the family business, right? Mom or dad, whoever's not involved, it can often fall into that, hey, don't cause trouble, everybody get along, put the relationships first. And this is a reminder that, sweeping conflict under the rug, like Mike Dierberg talked about a minute ago, that fear of conflict isn't solved by just not rocking the boat. We see this come about in early teen years. What other people think of them is important. Your self-worth comes from other people's approval. Another note about peacemaking, when we're in this mode, we can fall into the trap of thinking that because we've taken care of someone else or done them a favor, that obligates them to take care of me in return. So if you're dealing with a peacemaker in your family, don't let them hide. Remind them that it's healthy to have conflict, and that the best way to deal with it is to get it on the table so that we can talk about it and resolve it. The producer is the next level. These are folks that are trying to demonstrate competence, believing that I'm independent, I can do it myself, I can make it on my own. This level comes after peacemaking, and sometimes folks move to producing because they decide that the price of earning someone else's approval is too high, and instead I choose to dismiss everyone else and prove that I can do it on my own. Folks are working hard, they're challenging authority, feeling impatient. They're being tough, but they're doing it by removing themselves from the group, right? At its best, it's I'm going to make it on my own, but we're not talking about best behavior here. So it's that competitive, put up or shut up, show me, I don't need you. In a family business, it might be a brother running with one area of the business and kind of siloing himself or isolating himself to make a point. I can do this, I can succeed. The fifth level, partnering, is where we're hoping to be. Each of the four believe in a scarcity model, right? That I have to beat other people, that I have to outwit other people, I have to placate other people, or I have to do it all on my own. They all have downsides and they all operate from a place of being afraid that we won't get enough. So partnering believes that there is more than enough. It's a model of abundance. I can get or generate, we can get or generate, more than we need. So with self-acceptance and this model of abundance, we can empower ourselves, trust ourselves, and we're less defensive with others, which invites our family members to be less defensive and more trusting of us. Makes it easier to function proactively and effectively. Partnering mindset remembers that people are not right or wrong, good or bad, but that we all have needs and that our needs differ. It might cause tension, it might cause some disagreements, but we can disagree without having conflict. So on the next slide is a reminder that we each have a typical level. Our goal might be partnering, but it doesn't always happen like that. We also can move up and down these levels instantaneously, right? In the course of an hour, I might be at a couple different levels. Things that can do that are stress or feeling like we don't have enough rest, immediate past events, right? If somebody cuts me off on the drive into a meeting, I'm going to be walking in feeling some kind of way, and that might affect the level I'm coming to you. A trigger or getting hooked might also bring you down a couple levels. A family business saying I love to repeat is that your siblings know exactly where your buttons are because they are the ones who installed them growing up. you know, they know exactly where to poke you to bring you down to that lower level, to bring you down to that scorekeeping mindset, back to the playground. We call this getting hooked. You might be up there partnering, but somebody said something and all of a sudden you're back down at scorekeeping. And a mirror, right? If somebody approaches you at a 1 or a 2, it's very easy to get sucked back down and match them there. So in the moment, you might be feeling defensive, a little bit threatened. You might feel empty, hollow, or unsure of what to do. But either way, it's frustrating. So let's talk about how to get ourselves unhooked so that we're at less risk for fraying relationships or thinking less effectively. When you're feeling that moment of panic, you're stressed, maybe you don't want to respond, that's normal. That's the human condition. So to get yourself back up a couple levels, the first way is awesome when someone else can intervene. Someone else recognizes, hey, this isn't going well. Let me step in, deflect, that kind of thing. You can remove yourself from the situation, call a timeout, get yourself a moment to breathe. Remember your boundaries if you set them up earlier, right? Mike Dierberg talked about that in the beginning. If we pave the path, it's easy to point to those boundaries when we need them. But listen, ask questions, don't overreact. Try to walk yourself back up those steps. You might not get all the way to partnering, but if you know the framework, you can get yourself back up to a higher level of functioning, which requires some discipline. This next slide has a few tips. Think about how you think and relate to others. Be open about yourself. Engage in that level of awareness, self-monitoring, vulnerability, and admit to your regular style. Understanding when you get hooked, and then being willing to change. That's the first step of anything. Once you're ready to change, again, self-monitoring, asking for help, asking for feedback when you need it, and even helping others change can be useful for yourself. Teaching is one of the best ways of learning, right? You and your family might even choose to take this on together. So I'm going to pop us back to the next slide here and show you a reminder of the 5 levels. Sometimes just being able to name a behavior can help you work through it in your mind. If you can recognize, oh, I'm in a peacekeeping mindset right now. Is that actually where I want to be? Gives you the space to call it out and choose to respond instead of reacting emotionally. So give yourself a level check when you need it. I want to caution you about making assumptions about others' behaviors. So someone could enact in the same behavior, right? I could sit quietly in a meeting, and that might mean, that I'm being a peacemaker because I'm trying not to rock the boat or look foolish. It could also mean that I'm being a producer, though. I'm dismissing others. I'm not listening because I'm already planning my own strategy in my head without the rest of you. Or it could mean that I'm partnering. I'm feeling confident. I'm assessing the appropriate response. I'm engaging in active listening. So careful, trying to identify it in others. We certainly know it when we see it, but try not to jump to those assumptions. Try to focus on yourself and level checking yourself, right? My brother just pushed one of my buttons and I'm hooked into a scorekeeping mindset. I don't have any business wearing my owner hat and making decisions for the business right now. So recognize and give yourself space when you need it. My next slide here, my last slide, is a pause for reflection. So I'm going to ask you to use these questions to manage your own thinking and think about how to prevent or de-escalate conflicts. So I'm going to pause here and be quiet for a minute, for real. Jot down some thoughts. Okay. I hope you'll spend some more time with these. I want to keep our presentation moving, so maybe snap a picture of this with your cell phone and challenge yourself to keep coming back to these. None of us are going to get it right all of the time, but by slowing down and being intentional, we can help prevent feeling out of control, and we can choose how we would like to respond. So practice closing your knowing-doing gap and think about how you'd like to address conflict moving forward. All right, folks, thanks for your time today. I know First Bank's about to open it up for some questions. If there's something specific or sensitive you and your family are dealing with that you'd like to talk through, feel free to grab my email address here. Thanks so much.
All right, very good. Thank you so much, Kaitlyn. And we do have some questions that came in, and let me give a quick reminder before I get to those. To submit your own, just go ahead and click that webinar tool and type one away, and we'll get it addressed. So this first one says, I would imagine who we are dealing with will move us up or down the levels as well. Some just know how to push my buttons. Any thoughts on that?
That's the truth. I mean, that's the key facts of it, and recognizing those patterns will help you to deal with that, right? Recognizing, hey, my sister often operates from this model, and that's not good for either of us. So thinking that through and recognizing your own level as well as theirs can help you strategize about how can I move us both forward productively.
Very good. Thank you for that question and that answer. Another question says, what do we do if one of the family members has narcissistic tendencies?
Yeah, give us a call. I would say, let's see, that's tough to deal with and might be outside of the scope of the 5 levels, but challenging yourself to remain calm, focus on the facts. I think Mike shared that as a tip earlier. And again, pointing to as much concrete data as you can when you're dealing with a specific conflict. Mike, anything to add there?
No, I think that's a challenging problem to address. So understanding who they are, that's a big start, I would say.
All right, very good. I know that was a tough one. So again, folks, just a quick reminder, open up that little panel for questions, type one in, and we'll get that asked. Another question here for Kaitlyn. This says, how to decide if conflict is worth addressing, how to keep a disagreement in territory versus argument territory.
Yeah, this brings me back to Mike's tips too. So I'd be curious if Mike wants to chime in here, but you know, Mike, you talked about deep-seated issues, conflicts that are going to be tough to solve, and touched on a few tips there, but some things I'd add to consider if you're considering, should I approach this conflict? First of all, is it your conflict to solve? So with family-owned businesses, sometimes we'll inherit conflict from others along with the other things we might be inheriting. So it might be something that you are taking from the prior generation. It might be some tribalism or that kind of thing. So think about the context and who it actually involves. So that would be my number one. Number two, it would be, what's the real issue? So again, revisiting the levels. Are you mad about the thing you think you're mad about, or are you mad because you're getting pulled back into something from the past, maybe a scorekeeping mindset? And then, are you in the right frame of mind to approach the issue in the moment? If you're heated, if your emotions are high, it's not the right time to address the conflict.
Yeah, because I would add that you know, that the kinds of conflicts I had in mind where you wonder whether you should be tackling it like a family issue, let's say, that, you know, little disagreements in the company seem like big disagreements, in part because of some broader family issue. That broader family issue, if it's that serious, that deep-seated, it's not likely you on your own are going to be able to resolve it. You could try, but it might be something that you need to look to an outside partner like CMA to help you resolve that, and actually help you decide whether or not it's likely that you can resolve it.
All right, very good. Thanks so much for the question and the answers. Another one here says, do you have some just-in-time tips to de-escalate conflict over the holidays, even if it's through Zoom?
That's coming up. Mike, I'll take this one and you jump in. I would say my biggest tip would be to prepare yourself. You know where your buttons are, so if there's a particular topic that you feel strongly about, or that you know someone else feels strongly about, or a particular behavior that maybe grinds your gears that you can anticipate coming up, make a plan for how you'll respond. You know, somebody's going to bring up the same old topic. You can plan ahead. I'm going to respond with blank. Make yourself a script or an exit plan or whatever might work, and think about how you want to handle it. Some families we know even have like a safe word for the dinner table to call it out for each other. Hey, this is not where we want to be. Or even if you don't have that set up, pre-planned, it's okay to just call that time out. Hey, I think we should keep today focused on spending time together as a family. Let's not talk about the business until we're back in business hours.
Something I've heard from other family businesses, and I think this makes sense to me anyway, is the holidays should not be about family business. It should be about the family. And so I would suggest that, and I'm sure many of you have this kind of general rule that you don't talk family business, either at the dinner table or maybe just holidays, that kind of thing. So hopefully you guys can really celebrate the time together as family members and not be worrying about what's going on in the business or disagreements in the business, that kind of thing. And I think, frankly, that'll make the business stronger if you're able to keep that separation.
Yeah, so true. Thank you so much for that. All right, so I don't see any other questions just yet. Kaitlyn, Mike, let me just give you one last moment to kind of wrap us up here. Let's see if any other questions come in, but if not, I'll go ahead and end this after that. Any final thoughts?
I just want to say, thanks to Kaitlyn for doing this. This has been great to be a part of it. It is a, critically important topic, and we are going to, down the road, we'll cover more topics like this, and actually we'll probably do another session on conflict. So there's so much to talk about within this, within just this topic. So I'm excited to, that one, have Kaitlyn here today, and then for future webinars we'll do in 2021 and beyond. Kaitlyn?
Yeah, it's a tough topic, and it can be tempting or natural for family businesses to feel like we're the only one that's going through something like this. And so I'm here to tell you, you are not alone. You are not the only one that feels like your family might have some level of dysfunction or level of conflict within it. It's normal, and that doesn't make it easier to address. But hoping you all got some tips today on how to prevent it. Like Mike said, maybe in the future, focus on some more tips about how to manage it when it's happening.
All right, very good. We are going to be able to, another question came in. It was just thanking you, actually. We did have several questions asking about the recording. Yes, that will be available at First Stop Banks in the coming days. So with that said, we are going to give you a couple of minutes back in your day. Next up in the Center for Family-Owned Business webinar series, we'll have 2 sessions in January. One will be focused on the market outlook, and the other will be the second session in our Women-Owned Business series, and we'll tackle the topic of HR trends. Be on the lookout for First Bank emails for more information on that soon. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. A special thank you to Michael and Kaitlyn for their time and expertise. Please do take just a few moments to complete a brief survey to help us improve our service to you. Have a great day, everyone. We'll catch you next time.